Hello. I am very excited to have this webinar. I've been looking forward to it for actually many weeks. We tried to get together for a long time, me and John Gaeta. So I have the big pleasure and honor to introduce our guest for today. John is an inventor, innovator, and an Academy Award winning designer. He's probably best known for his work on the famous original Matrix trilogy, where, as you probably remember, he explored this kind of media formats such as bullet time, virtual cinematography, volumetric capture, etc. And in fact, these are the type of approaches that inspired me to get into this business. And they also foreshadow today's XR, virtual reality, mixed reality, Holo Cinema, things that we're going to talk about in this session. A little bit about him. He started originally with a Trumbull Company, who you probably know the founder that designed the visual approaches to the 2001 Blade Runner, as well as invented new formats, including Showscan, immersive simulation, rides, etc. He was also engaged with a creative collaborator for the Wachowski siblings on multiple cross-platform, not only the Matrix trilogy, but also the Speed Racer and others. Later on, which he evolved to working with Microsoft in a project called Analog, which incubated the famous Kinect and HoloLens that today is, as you know, got a $21 billion order. Now, he's also co-founder of the Lucasfilm Immersive Entertainment Division. And there he established a number of things in entertainment experiences, including the Star Wars and other imaginative worlds. And after that, he joined Magic Leap, our partner, and as such, as Senior Vice President for Creative Strategy, he develop roadmaps for things like North Star initiatives, future platform, future forms of content, etc. And today he's working and providing strategic guidance for a number of progressive VR companies, and we are extremely honored to have him on our advisory board. Talking about Matrix, as you probably know, so today in 2020, John is forging a new generation of the Matrix in collaboration with Lana Wachowski and with support of Warner Brothers. We'll talk about those things. But first of all, I want to welcome you. That was a long introduction, probably the longest I've had so far.
Thanks a lot. I like the way you start those shows.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Nice
Thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it. So before we get, I have many questions for you. I mean, I don't think we can get through all of them, but I would like to start with showing something because you are such a visual person. So I hope you don't mind, but I digged up some of the footage and some images from what you created. So for the benefit of the audience. So if you don't mind, I'll get started with that. And then I would like to hear your take on this, what your thoughts are and your comments, to hear directly from you. So here we go. Just a second. Technology, there.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Obviously, that's my favorite scene from the whole movie, and it became an iconic scene. I must ask you a question. When you guys did this scene, where the whole idea about this real world being simulated was not yet published. People like Boostrom and others that currently have actually made this theory or this approach public. So can you tell me a little bit more about the whole idea and concept of the movie?
Well, I would, offer that some of the ideas that underpin, what we regard as science fiction back in the late 90s, actually, as science fiction had bubbled up earlier, you can look at, whether it's H.G. Wells or Isaac Asimov, but in particular, you could look at a madman named Philip K. Dick, who was very preoccupied with this idea that he was in fact living in some form of a computer simulation. And, for all intents, it seems like he really believed it. And so you can find interesting interviews. There are many, many different inputs that the Wachowskis, sort of consumed as young people, more than just those. I mean, there were like, the sort of the expressive thinking of like Japanese animation writers and directors. A lot of philosophical books, that sort of speculated about, the nature of one's reality. So a lot of inputs that went into that, along with the the reality that those times were about at least Western world coming online. The internet had moved from DARPA to mainstream by the 90s across that decade, and which is a kind of a short period of time, really. And I think that whether you were a young person who was starting to really think harder about the potential of, let's say, video games, or the potential of the internet, or the convergence of those things, those are all things that were sort of in their thoughts and much more at the time. Yeah.
It's fascinating, and I could spend probably an hour just talking about these topics. But I would like to move on to your work, because your work was amazing. At that time, I couldn't believe it. I remember as a kid then watching this, and I was like, how do they do this? Like, how do you do things like bullet time? And I was extremely intrigued about it. So can you tell us a little bit about that work and how you came up with those ideas?
Sure. Here's how I would put it. It's not often that that an idea is sort of a lightning strike. Not every day you have the happy accident of the whatever acid or chemical that sort of crossed the wires, that led to the telephone, right?
Yeah.
Often it's somewhat of a collective movement of ideas, right? Like any art movement or science movement is a lot of people working on little facets of it, and eventually, consider these things building blocks, and then someone will pick a few of these building blocks, and then they'll make something, and then on, and things evolve. And that is absolutely true with technology. It's rare, to say that, well, it happens, but at the time there was research going on in photogrammetry, areas like photogrammetry, in early graphics, a technique called image-based rendering, where there was projection mapping methods, which, and then, for me at the time, I was working in a very sophisticated visual effects facility that was started by Doug Trumbull, who did 2001. But, we had the benefit of having really cutting edge resources at our disposal, in particular, we had like robotic camera systems that were like, could do remarkable things. And we were pushing limits at the time. At the time, it was pretty cutting edge, but, using computer-aided design to create camera paths so that we could understand how you could, couple computer graphics to photography. And why is that relevant? Because when you're planning, in a 3D environment, and especially if you're planning photography, you're in a different kind of, set of capabilities, right? You can imagine placing a camera anywhere if you know that you can put a robotic camera positioned anywhere, right? So it is easy to imagine, taking a picture of a thing from every angle, right? The beginning of sort of computational photography. So we experimented quite a bit with, not just singular camera paths, but arrays, right? An array of views from which we could construct any camera path. And we would, use computer visualizations to figure out those things.
I mean, the output was something stunning, I must say. And then, and it's still today, I mean, in many ways, what you pioneered at that time. Quite remarkable. And I know that you did a trilogy and then you moved on to Speed Racer. And I must admit, I haven't seen this movie until I learned about this, and I went back and saw the movie. And I think this movie is amazing, and it hasn't got probably the recognition it deserves in many ways. In terms of, at least I'm looking at this as a technology guide. Any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, always. I love this project so much as well. So, Matrix was about hyper-realism and sort of the sort of nuances of reality, and at least when you were inside the Matrix. And we did that for years, and we developed techniques that, aim to, at least for that day, attempt, to capture the real world and then sort of create a computer, graphic construct from it. But the other thing that was going on in Matrix, just to lead into this, was that we were, designing composition and the way scenes unfolded. We looked at a lot of Japanese anime actually at the time, because it was very different than Western animation in the way that they would, expressively lay out, action and moments, right? It was more not what's real, but more like, how do you feel, right, when you see this? And so the Japanese animation felt more limitless, right? Like they would do anything with a camera and anything, with a character, and the way they moved and the way that time and space worked, all in very different than Western animation. So we tried to imbue that in the Matrix whenever possible. But after Matrix, the Wachowskis, wanted to circle back and drill down even deeper into that sort of Eastern cinema, approach. And so they, this apparently Speed Racer was something they watched as little kids. And, they wanted to see if they could contemporize it. So we jumped in, and the thing I would say that was innovative and remarkable at that time was that, we wanted to take this idea of capturing the world and using it, in a new way to another level. So about 80% of this movie is a green screen movie.
Wow.
And at the time, Sin City, it was like kind of in the days of Sin City, which I loved myself, right? Mm-hmm. Which was, film noir, black and white aesthetic, super hyper graphic, very well executed comic book movie. And at the time, we wanted to essentially kind of make the counter thesis, right, to Sin City. We wanted something that was like pop culture, vivid, colorful, but also, use this sort of multi-layered, kind of way of doing things. So we designed this approach that had a lot of immersive photography as its backbone. We would go around the world and we would shoot 360 spheres,
Wow.
many of them, clusters of them, all around environments.
Are you still with me? I think we have lost the signal. Let me just check. One moment. Sorry for that. We will cut it in any case. Let's see if it's on my side. I think we may have lost John. Let's see. John, you with us? I can see you. But I don't see your camera, nor do I hear you. Okay. Technology is always fun. Let's see what's going on. Let me just probably give him a call. I will do that. I'll call Adam, my assistant, and see what's going on. One moment. He's probably not even aware that we have lost him. Hi, Adam.
Okay.
So we lost John, but
I'm back. We
Hi.
are cursed. We are cursed.
No worries.
I can't believe
Good.
twice in 3 weeks. Okay, so I'm back. Hold on a second. Coming back online here. All right. Sorry about that.
So
not even what happened there. All right. So I'll go back to where we were. Okay.
perfect.
Okay. So we for Speed Racer, part of the execution was to literally canvas the world and take spherical photography, super high resolution, beautiful HDR photography of locations that we could never shoot, if we wanted to take a film crew. It would be too logistically difficult, whether it's in the Alps or in some like really difficult location, or maybe it was like a beautiful castle where they literally don't want you to walk on the floors, right? But we could get a photographer in there. And so we would go and we would shoot clusters. We called them bubbles, but they were 360 spheres. And then we would take these spheres and we would essentially dissect them into layers, into dimensional layers. And then we would, we would paint them. So we'd enhance them, right, in color and other things. We paint extra details. So we'd have really incredible matte painters add all this detail and transform them. And then we would add 3D and live action in the foreground. So, we did virtual, production, which is now the rage in entertainment. We did a full virtual production approach to this film. And we had a methodology, even on stage, where like wherever the camera was pointing, would direct the background view accordingly, right? So the cinematographer could use anywhere inside of these, these arrays of spheres to sort of place things. And it was a whole method. And, because I and my Matrix colleagues from before believed that this would be like not only a good way to approximate the form of multiplanar animation, but also take advantage of the beginning of immersive photography, that form of immersive photography.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm curious, were 3D bubbles even a thing then? I mean, were there
no
360 cameras at that point, right?
Well, no, there were plenty of people in mid 2000s that were going around the world taking beautiful 360 shots. I have to imagine you might have been doing that then, but or close to that around that time. But nobody was really locking up 3D to those environments. So we would also understand the shape and depth of everything that we shot, because we needed to affix computer graphics into them. So we were adding a depth layer, but it was very labor intensive, whereas, it's only been since that time, 2006 or 7. Now we can do all of that on an iPhone today, right?
Yeah.
All of it, the depth capture, the immersive.
But it's a very smart way, I must say, to capture the world, because the fidelity of computer-generated images, backgrounds, is very difficult to even, I mean, today you can do it, but at that time. So I really, again, a very innovative way to do that. And the movie is just beautiful. If you guys haven't seen it, just warmly recommend to do it. Let's move on, because you kind of never stop. You move from one thing to the other, and you evolve. And it must be fun to switch from the movie industry to working with Microsoft. So tell me a little bit about what you did
Well, I had, this is sort of a parallel story. A lot of folks, who began in computer graphics, at first they pursued cinema because that's where the state of the art was, creating new worlds, and there was true innovation happening there. There is now still, but really the late 90s to the mid 2000s was a really active time of groundbreaking work of all sorts in visual effects. But what started to happen was that the gaming industry started advancing new ideas in graphics, persistence, real-time, interactivity, but also quality across the 2000s. And I had a number of close colleagues that were compelled by that, more so than just making cinema, making shots and slaving on one thing at a time. So a number of them kind of left VFX, and they started going into AAA game lab scene and pioneering games. And then others did that. And also, Silicon Valley was starting to pick up on some of these ideas. I feel that they're picking up on ideas that they see in these science fiction stories, in movies, in games, and they're like, maybe that is kind of the shape of a possible new application, a feature, even a platform, something that you might see in a movie, right? The way holograms are sort of conveyed and used, right? The way that they are, or in the case of Star Wars, the sort of holographic communications you can do through a droid, et cetera, et cetera. So, Silicon Valley, themselves, they have untold amounts of brilliant engineers, but they kind of need directions. And so I noticed, in that same time period through the 2000s that, whether it's Google or Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, they're spinning up these tiny little labs that most of the rest of us don't even know about. And they're now pushing these sort of media, experimental media programs. They come and they go. They are either too early and they're not going to make it into product, or they sort of keep it warm. But this whole lab culture starts drawing in talent from game and visual effects, because they know that at some point graphics are going to play a role. And there's many other things, that one could talk about that. I haven't seen enough discussion about the emergence of that, that whole era, right? And the implications of that. There's many things we don't know, right, that are kind of getting warm. But anyway, the point being is that I had a bunch of colleagues go that direction, and then they started asking me to help with some direction. What would you do if you could do this? Would you help us sandbox, with this particular new idea for interface? So I wound up getting sort of happily drawn away from cinema after Speed Racer, and sort of spent 3 to 4 years in sort of a stealth ops incubation mode with the same people who developed Kinect and HoloLens, this group. And I had some friends who had ended up inside that, and they were a serious blue sky team that had an absolutely insane tech stack back end if they've discovered something that they wanted to productize. So, in the beginning, the Kinect was thought of as maybe a gaming accessory, but it's quickly emerging as it's emerging now, which we always knew since the very first days, into a world sense platform of like really useful platform. And a lot of that work, the Kinect work, and at the time I was involved, I think they named it while I was still working with them.
Wow.
They were turning essentially this sort of like real-time, lightweight, sort of human tracking interface, this human interface, right? And they were starting to realize that they could do a whole lot more than just simple button pushing and switching. And it started to, kind of filter into new things like augmented reality labs. And it was before they had glasses, but they had like other kinds of transmission screens where they could see computer graphics and they could put their hands in there and touch computer graphics and things like this. So I was involved, peripherally with a lot of that. There were things that we researched there that even to this day I still haven't seen yet come out. But there are very, very sophisticated things you can do using posture, gaze, hands, and whatnot to drive content of any sort in a very sophisticated way, and particularly if you use AI and other things in addition.
Absolutely. I just need to comment. So couple of comments there. I mean, Kinect was the one device that really hit a hot button. I think they sold 10 million units in no time.
Yeah.
And I was immediately captured by that because we've been working, as you know, 22 years in virtual reality. And one thing we did, we designed actually something called the interactive mirror based on that technology. So the ability to try things, not only to dress up, but actually interact with a screen by just using gestures. And this has been used very much in education. So yeah, that technology, even before the glasses, had a lot of opportunities. But now that technology then evolved and what became the HoloLens. And HoloLens, as you know, is one of the three big contenders for the new computing platform for the world, right? Where we're going, it's between Apple, I guess, Facebook, and HoloLens. You may add Magic Leap to that list also, sorry, maybe four. But, for me, I was blown away with the fact that now the same device that I thought was kind of geeky device, now the US Army decided to place a $21 billion order. And that, if anything, shows that this technology has validity as a means to convey information and knowledge transfer. So a little bit of your thoughts around the HoloLens and this type of technology in general.
Well, these are, parallel platforms that we're actually talking about. The Kinect allowed if the folks at Microsoft, the Kinect and technologies like that, and they had an array of different things like that they would test. And so too was Google, and so too was Apple, and et cetera, and so forth. The idea of being able to dynamically sense the world in all ways, in particular human beings, and like you can sense many things from a human being, from the literal, as in like here's my posture, here's where I'm looking at, even biometric stuff, here's how I'm feeling. But you can do a lot more than just that. You can begin to predict, obviously, after much learning, right, from the way people want to move and express themselves to drive some kind of virtual thing. Sounds like we have cicadas.
Yeah, it is something that happens. Again, our technology is not working.
Cicadas have gotten inside of the web call. They're everywhere. Okay, that sounds better. Okay, so so there's one end of this, like what's interesting about what Microsoft is doing is they do understand that there are different pillars that you need that you can sort of put together. And as well, when we were at Magic Leap, we understood this as well. Of course, Magic Leap is not Microsoft. Microsoft has just a remarkable array of technologies that it can deploy. Same too with Google. But one end of it is like sensing, right? What are the ways that you can sort of know explicitly, but also predictively what a human being might do, their intent. And, it's never so simple as like, and literal as I went and turned on the light switch. It's usually like, I think that I need to change the state of the room. I look towards a solution. Oh, there's a light switch. And then I begin to posture and I'm moving towards the light. There's a whole series of things that we do that start to give clues as to our intents, right? And it's like many, you could study this for a career, right? All of the ways to predict human intent, including what did you do last time? What did you do the last 100 times? What did 1,000 people do the last 1,000 times? And so there is obviously the sensing, but then there's sort of the analytics around the sensing, and then there's using that to predict and drive things, almost anticipating what you intend to do. And if it is known what you intend to do, then you can have content meet you in all sorts of interesting ways because it's already ahead of you. Now, as far as HoloLens, the thing that I think is not as clearly understood is that there's a difference between the everyday consumer user, the average person in their home, and that same person in a location that's enabled to allow them to do much more. So if it's just me and my HoloLens or my Magic Leap, everything is on the device to some degree to tell you what's happening dynamically in front of you. However, if you're in a location that is sensed, right? Let's say you're in a factory, that is very well equipped to track and assess the position and status of everything, or you're in a theme park and there's sophisticated sensing going on to understand exactly where people are, where rides happen to be, what media is playing exactly. All these things can be aggregated. This data can be aggregated, and in a sense, the glasses can be plugged into this, right? Like the glasses can essentially be a view into what would not be seen by the user, but is essentially this simulation happening underneath it all. And the simulation in and of itself is being used to help guide content. So if I'm making a virtual, Winnie the Pooh walking around, in a theme park, if Winnie the Pooh knows where crowds are, Winnie the Pooh knows what the weather is, Winnie the Pooh knows, what event is happening in the land right next to him. Winnie the Pooh can do a lot of things. And then if Winnie the Pooh walks up to you, Winnie the Pooh could as well know you and your intents, and a lot of things could be the case. So there's in every sector examples where you could put those couple of things together, right? You can imagine it for any kind of technology industry, energy industry, architecture, development of cities, tourism, and education. You can imagine those things in all of those things.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very much true. Now, I just want to, because I'm still curious to move on a little bit chronologically here. So after Microsoft, then you moved on to Lucasfilm and you co-founded the Immersive Entertainment Division. And I've seen some famous images that where you are in a cave-like environment. I believe that's the one. And I am, as you probably know, very fascinated about caves.
You're a caveman.
I'm a K man. We've sold probably 2,200. So to see Hollywood doing a K for me was like, wow, they get it. And not only did they get it, but you push the envelope far beyond what we did on our side with respect to visual quality experience. Tell us a little bit about your experience there and at Lucasfilm and your leadership in this aspect.
Okay, so the way I wound up back in entertainment in a way, not movies per se, even though it was the era of Star Wars, new Star Wars. One of my colleagues from The Matrix, who's currently the CTO of Epic Games, his name is Kim LaBerry. At the time, he was the chief strategy officer for Lucasfilms. They hired him because Kathy Kennedy wanted to evolve them into sort of a next generation version of themselves. And at the time, I mean, I didn't know it, but they did. At the time, they knew that Disney was very close to acquisition and that there would be this whole new era of Star Wars, right? They knew that there were years of phenomenal new possibilities coming, and it would, and so they wanted to, start, mixing up their program a little bit, try to add innovation, because these films, well, it wasn't just these films. When you have a universe as big as Star Wars and you're Disney and you're going to launch, a whole new sort of, time of it, it's AAA games, it's comic books, it's television shows, it's all sorts of new media, it's crazy innovative marketing, it's theme parks, right? So all of that was going to take a lot of people and a lot of thinking. So I got invited into Lucasfilm, by Kathy Kennedy and Kim LaBerry to work with, the luminaries, right, that make up the core of ILM and Lucasfilm, and try to think of, new things we could try during Star Wars. So, in the beginning, I was, invited to work for a period of time just on the conceptual ideation of Star Wars things. Mm-hmm. So it began literally as paintings, and I got a chance to work with Doug Chang and Rick Carter, the production designer, and really a world-class, to this day, world-class conceptual team working on Star Wars ideas, planets, characters, events, things that could happen, what the future of the Force could be, these sorts of things, right? It's a good start, right? So I'm sort of like awash in the world of Star Wars.
That must have been super fun. I mean, it was in the candy store.
Incredible and super rare. It doesn't happen often, these sorts of opportunities. And, not since Matrix, really, did I see this opportunity in world building that was happening. It was like 2012, 13. And after a period of time, they're like, what do you...
interrupt you, but, that made me think, because Matrix about that we don't live in the real world, about other creating a world that we inhabit. And what we're doing, finally enough, at Star Wars, you are creating those worlds that, these fantasy worlds that you then populated with various avatars and characters. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because their story, the sort of Star Wars story, is that, it began as George Lucas and his imagination, but then the fans became so big and wide that they wanted to participate. So there was this, long period of like fan art, still is fan art and fan stories, and so many things actually in the beginning of like, first interesting experimental MMO, kind of research was done through Lucas Games, and on and on. You could talk about all sorts of things that having a world allowed you to, try to think about the different extensions and expressions of it. They tried everything over decades. At any rate, so I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Maybe what I'll do is I'll take like where my head is now, because I had just been in 4 solid years of like, immersive with Microsoft, and I'll see if I can apply that a little bit. So after a while, after a year, they're like, what do you think? What could we do? And I, worked with my friend Kim, and then another person, Kiri Hart, who was the head of development of everything, of all things creative. And we're like, we want to set up new media, next gen, real time entertainment, immersive division, and somehow, we convinced Bob Iger himself to put some investment behind that. He came and saw demonstrations that we did, and was, I think, a believer. And he, sort of put the wheels in motion to have, again, sort of a rarefied lab type scene.
Did you show him the cave?
Yeah, we showed him a lot of things. The cave was just one. There were many things. I mean, there are experiments in super high fidelity real-time graphics that have happened there, are happening there, that have never seen the light of day, that I would sort of contend are clearly amongst the most sophisticated, most interesting, most well-designed that you can imagine, that have not seen the light of day. And this is the unfortunate thing of many labs, that they don't actually show. So, I got myself interested in both augmented reality and virtual reality and holographic projection, because they're all very complementary. You could use the same underpinning methods, engines, to execute multiple platform types, which is an important thing, going forward, is to know that it's not all designed for VR. It's not all designed for an online game. It could actually spoke from a hub into multiple platforms, the same base, if built in the right way. So the holographic cave was our attempt. This was before Magic Leap even had their second version. They had both Microsoft and Magic Leap just had a room with a amount of equipment that could never be moved, that you'd have to plug your head into. I wanted to shortcut that and see if I could feel what it would be like to be in full field of view holographic. And so a cave is the obvious way to do it, because you can do it right off the bat with the cave. What we did at XLab was and I'll at this point give credit to Imagineering and Disney, who were running their own really killer, interesting immersive cave research to sort of design, the park, and to design possible experiences like rooms and things in this sort of format, this holographic cave format. And where we had the privilege of being invited to hang out with them, talk to them, get influenced by them. And then what we wanted to do was we wanted to kind of get it to a level where storytelling and action and a lot more sophisticated things that we were used to in movies and games could be done. So we basically hooked into our cave real-time mocap, right? So we could drive creatures, characters. We've got these experiences with really very nicely rendered Star Wars characters and creatures and spaceships could all be brought into the holographic cave, which we called, what do we call it? The X deck. And that's what you saw, those few clips that got out on a few stories, was us doing that. You could have a real-time interaction with a creature, right? Or a character, because it was being driven by an actor right there off camera who, knew what we intended. So we put many, many people through that cave trying to study things, like from little kids it was like watching wonder before your eyes, right? They're like, and then to, people in their late 80s, even, right? 90s, right? Who were enthralled, like they were kids again, right? So I learned that it's viable. It's like there are ways to do it even today. And it was sort of helping me understand what was about to happen in glasses, right? And eventually locations that are sort of enabled to bring sophisticated content. Now, I'll just I know where you want to go here. So this would be a natural.
Yeah, I want to interrupt you because I assume you want to go to Magic Leap, correct? Or you have some, okay. But before we leave, just a few comments about Cave, because I did my first Cave in 1995 with Silicon Graphics. At that time, you had to have a multi-stack $1 million computer to drive, and we were using it to design Volvo cars at that time. But since then, I've always been fascinated about this technology. And you're right, because you are immersed and you are affecting the world by moving. We didn't go as far as actually having a character on the side. But where I want to go with this is that now we have retired the Cave. So we stopped last year. No longer do we sell. We still support them, but we moved totally in the cloud. And in some way, I have a hope that in a not too long distant future, I can go to Office Depot and buy some paint and just paint my walls.
Yeah.
And then have a little mobile phone that I connect, and then suddenly my home becomes a cave.
100%.
So I think there is something about that technology that is non-intrusive. With the current sensors today, you don't even have to have very bulky glasses or anything like that. And maybe we can also do autostereoscopic environments. So I'm still fascinated, and I hope before next 10 years or so that we can see that. Anyway, I do want to see one.
Let me add one thing to your thing. Just a couple things. One is that all this work going on with virtual production, is derivative of these days at Lucasfilm. So like The Mandalorian, for example, all of those preliminary tests were done in the same time period. So there's all these overlapping tests. There's like what you can do with real-time content, how you can have actors, but it really doesn't have to be entertainment, but we're doing entertainment. So you can have people interfacing directly with virtual environments and virtual characters with screens around you for various reasons. Now, the virtual production stages, they're all LED stages. One tweak and they could be holographic virtual stages. And the actors could actually have spatial proximity to interacting with the computer graphics character, and they would be spatially there. Would they have to wear glasses? Yes. Would you have to take the glasses off of them? Sure. But it's all viable. And
you can do that in post-production, right?
Yeah, there's lots of things you could imagine. But there's, none of these glasses. I mean, I think the next generation of mixed reality glasses could, increase the field of view to what feels like almost full, but not quite. It's the only way that you can have full field of view, full immersive holographic is still in this way. And you need to be knowing what that is going to be like before it's enabled in the glasses. So there's an absolute use, multiple uses for this. You're muted.
Yeah. What I want to say is that I know quite a lot of people, both in Hollywood, not as many as you do, but a lot in technology. And I've been in this industry now for 36 years. But at no point have I met anyone that can, go from things like, for example, Matrix, and then go to Disney, and then go back to Lucasfilm and innovate constantly. It's like a spiral innovation. And guess what? After Lucas, you went to Magic Leap, and Magic Leap, in my humble opinion, is almost magic in itself, because what was achieved there is, for me, still incredible. I mean, company that raised $3 billion and reinvented, did what everybody was dreaming about. And I think Magic Leap, to a large degree, is the reason that, for example, Apple and others now, and Facebook, are paying attention and investing what I believe is becoming a $1 trillion war about what will be owning our brains for the next 10 years. Because if you think you're hooked because you spend 6 hours on your phone a day, that's nothing. I mean, I predict that once this device is mature, and Magic Leap was, I would say, the first one that had that capacity. One of the first, at least. It's opening a door to something incredible. So tell me a little bit about this Magic Leap story and your contribution to that company. Thank you.
Okay, well, this is I'm not going to say a lot, but I could say I swear I could write maybe a book or two about the things and the people that I got to meet there. So I would put it in these terms. The drive to reach some of the vision that Roni was laying out there was intense and taken very seriously by some very, very smart people. The company itself had, in my view, and it all has to do with what you prioritize as a value, right? So you have a bit of a conflict when you have a hardcore engineering mission, which is, in this case, the transmission of holographic images in daylight and the immense issues with tracking and all of those sorts of things. This is like a rocket ship mission. It always was. There was a lot of people I noticed in the press naively disregarding the sheer immensity, right, of that lift. And somehow magically, and the engineers there were able to get on the page. And even before, other companies that were like 100x more resourced. However, okay, so there's that. I'll wait on the however. Also, what is interesting and rare was that Roni's vision, included, sort of creating a joyous world for everyone to play in. And he was driven and motivated by similar things as, say, like a Walt Disney type character. And to me, that was attractive and enough of a reason to sort of kind of attempt to help focus them. But what I found was, happening, and I've seen this, it isn't just Magic Leap, but I've seen this happen multiple times over, is that when there are too many people in the mix, there are too many splintered visions. And just like VR, the everything platform, if you do not have focus and, concentration of resources around achieving a single something, right? You can really be taken out and diluted and sort of break on the many, many missions thing. And it was pervasive. It unfortunately was pervasive across Magic Leap, was that there were 1,000 missions that all required financial resources, technical resources, right? And in the outside world, there's like 10 times that coming at them. I will tell you that I have never seen during a period of time during Magic Leap, maybe a couple of years, I have never in my life imagined so much opportunity and business potential coming from the leaders of, you name it, right? Industry, governments, right? Everything.
It's incredible. No, sorry, please.
Well, we'll just leave it there because to some degree it was all left on the table.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a tragic story.
Yeah, no, but one of my favorite commercials, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, is the commercial from Apple called "The Crazy Ones." I'm sure it's been famous, so you know about it, right? So it's a commercial where there's images of Einstein, Charlie Chaplin, Dali, and others, and it says these are the crazy ones, and people that are crazy enough that they believe they can change the world. Those are the ones that do. So if you haven't seen it, please watch that commercial. And I get always a little bit teary-eyed when I listen to that, I see that commercial. And I kind of, to a certain extent, can connect to Ronnie. I met him once, and I had spoken with him once. I even met him. We had a conversation online. But you don't know this part of the story. I don't highlight it often. You know, when I started my own business in 87, and I took it from 87 to 97 to amazing ride. It was a simulation company. But I got my eyes on virtual reality in 1994. So when I saw that, I saw it on TV. From that moment, I was possessed, and I'm still am. and I bought computers from Silicon Graphics for $6 million. Just, I had them in my basement. And I was doing everything from defense to we work in entertainment. And I took that company public for $100 million. I took it to $512 million in 11 months. And we were the darlings in Sweden of every single TV show. I mean, I was not in Sweden, around the world. And we went from 200 employees to 600 employees. I don't know any virtual reality company still today that has that many employees. I mean, now Facebook has 10,000, but at that, as an independent company. And it was an amazing trip, and we had a lot of fun, and we were literally 22 years ahead of time. But and as all these type of stories, we went up because it was a public company. People hyped the stock, and it also went down. And out of those down spiral, we acquired EON. So EON was one of the 7 businesses. ABB acquired another one, and Autodesk. So there's about 3,000 people working that used to work for me that work in new capacity, new companies, and somehow when you go through something like this, that's painful, right? It's and you come out of it, and you feel so deeply that this was the right thing to do, although we were 22 years wrong. So since then, virtual reality, unfortunately, has gone through many dips. We had a crash 2001 when .com, we used to do Web 3D. And then we had a crash, I think, 2006, 2007, the Second Life and all these things. And then there was a crash 2010 where 3D TV was supposed to be the biggest thing since sliced bread. And then we had a crash famously 2017, 18, when it's not only Magic Leap that was affected. Blipar went bankrupt, and 90% of Chinese companies. So when you've gone through these Lazarus moments, you die and you're reborn, you still hope. And I must say, I kind of gave up on virtual reality. 2008, I said, I've had enough. This is it. I can't take it anymore. In fact, I gave up EON, and I started a new business called Greenwave Reality, and I took that to $250 million in 3 years. So you kind of feel that this is probably not the best use of my talents. So having said that, I don't want to divert the discussion too much. Having said that, seeing what's happening now, and I hope we can get to that discussion very soon, which is so exciting. It's really, really happening now. And I think the next 10 years, it's a little bit like parallels to I think artificial intelligence has got through a 20 years winter. And most of the guys, the brilliant guys, they are in their 60s, right? And that work now behind it. And I feel that VR is going through a similar. So what I'm getting to is that we will have fun together the next 10, 20 years. So we need to keep healthy to do that. Anyway, sorry, going back to Magic Leap. So tell me about Magic Leap, and tell me a little bit about your role there and what you did. To the extent, I know it's a lot of non-disclosure and probably not can share everything, but I think it's really fascinating for the audience. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll make one point on your point, because your story is very interesting, which is why it's enjoyable to talk to you today, because you are a super vet. You've seen the different wars. I have evolved my understanding that these R's, the R's in XR, are not parallel or separated. They're actually converged in a way. And the way I look at it is, the content, it's the content positioned somewhere. It could be positioned online. It could be positioned on top of the real world, but it's basically positioned somewhere. And the ways that one could sort of interface and view this content are many, right? There are a spectrum of ways of interfacing the same content. I could just go on my PC and interface with the content, like playing Fortnite, for example. But I could also visit the content on any number of mobile devices. I could put on VR goggles and be inside a version of the content. If the content is aligned to the real world, let's say it couples over the top of a place, couples and interfaces, I can do that with mixed reality glasses. The content doesn't have to be, super high-end 3D like AAA gaming or visual effects. It can be anything in media, right? But the idea is that I think a lot of these companies that make glasses and even hardware devices think that that is the sun in the middle of the universe, but it's not. That's a window to the sun. The sun is actually the content positioned where it's been positioned. And the position of that content could actually be multiple places at the same time, right? So if, for example, the content we all care about, let's say it's a holographic depiction of the president doing the State of the Union, right? Like, let's say that's the most important thing. The president delivers the State of the Union.
Yep.
And I want to see that in the platform of my choosing, right? Now, that's not an interactive game example. I could use a science example where maybe it's a simulation of climate change, whatever it is, right? Whatever that important content is, where we're going is that people are going to window into that content from multiple different kinds of windows, but it's still going to orbit what matters to them. And then, of course, we haven't even seen the true sort of rooting of XR as a social networking, type of platform, but it's coming. And that's going to be the sort of the inflection point where we've gotten out of these, 1 to 6 people, really small things or single user things by necessity. Because of the technical limits of the day. And then we start moving into what really it's going to be about, which is going to be with other people. So as far as Magic Leap, what I, again, had the sort of good fortune was to be allowed to absorb for about a year and then sort of make comments on possible directions. So I looked at the wide field of things that different groups inside of Magic Leap. It's like it was a bubble inside. It was a bubble in the state of Florida. Kind of an odd thing. I was
thinking, why Florida of all places?
Where Roni grew up. Well, Roni grew up some of his years there, but these bubbles are double-edged swords, right? Like, so the bubble is away from Silicon Valley, so you're not contaminated by being in the neighborhood in a way, right? You're not, but at the same time, you're isolated, and so you are not getting the benefit of sort of awareness of other things that you need to be aware of, or the benefit of certain talent that doesn't necessarily live in Florida, right? So they have to import all of the talent.
Yeah, that must be painful because
super problematic, in my opinion, because it's a big life decision for a person, and you don't get everyone you really need. So inside of Magic Leap, I surveyed and I really broadened my understanding of two things. Broadened my understanding of sort of the future. One is game engine technology, like the potential. At some point, the word game is going to have to be sort of modified because these engines are basically going to be used and are being used for everything. Every sector can use real-time simulation, visualization, content of all sorts. It can be applied to education as much as it can for entertainment or enterprise. At any rate, so game engines, and also the idea that similarly, right, that a person would want to experience whatever sort of insightful visualization or content in situ, was obvious as well. So at Magic Leap, I realized that every sector actually had a vision or an interest in not just glasses, which were not like just magical viewers, but like the idea of spatial computing.
Yep.
Right. So spatial computing is like a term that sort of bubbled up during the years of Magic Leap. I don't know if it started there or started elsewhere. It doesn't matter, because to me it has resonance. Spatial computing really is the sort of where we were talking about earlier in the call, is sort of the amalgamation of sensing, whether that's just understanding the form of things, but also the dynamic change of things that are happening in real time, and then to be able to analyze that and then to essentially direct or drive some kind of content with this understanding, right? It's a big ecosystem of data that you have to sift, clean, interpret, and then use to drive behavior in content. And then you put on your interface, the glasses, that also are set. You can put your voice into it, and other things. I think controllers are kind of clunky, but like other ways of sort of understanding posture and gesture, all that stuff, right? So the glasses give you the ability to now interface the content in a sense, right? So like I said, every sector that you can imagine has a possible vision for this kind of spatial computing paradigm that's still happening. It's like going to happen across this generation, this decade.
I agree. And I must say one thing, that going through these projects that I've shared with you, you realize very quickly that content is king, right? And the ability to have something to drive. So it's not enough that you develop these wonderful glasses, right? But you have to do all the other things to make it happen. And I've been very much preoccupied over the last 2 decades on how do we make that simple? How do we make that easy? And where can we focus? Because you can focus, as you said, this is we use it every aspect of our lives. But I'm particularly interested in, I know we're going to talk about a little later, is knowledge transfer, whether it's anything to do with for schools. It's my I'll mute myself just for a second. Okay, because I think there's some sound effect there. Yes. So I'm very preoccupied about that, and how can we solve that problem, and how can we do it globally? So I do have a 180 seconds video for you, where I actually borrowed a few slides from you're in the end, because I think we land there. And so if you don't mind, I'll share that, and I want your thoughts on this. I'll give you my thoughts on it quickly, and then I would like your thoughts on it, because I think it's kind of addressing some of the issues we cover. So you should be able to see my screen now, correct?
Yes.
So what we're looking at here, what I'm looking at is how can you do that in a way that is done by anyone? And I think you need to solve a number of problems. You need to make it easy. You need to make it agnostic. You need to make it as smooth as PowerPoint. You need to have a vast library created somehow. In our case, 1.1 million. You need to be able to be compatible with any type of formats in terms of import. But here's the beauty. You need to actually be able to use your phone and scan anything. And that's possible today. So you can actually, in a minute, very good quality, create objects and then encapsulate them like you used to do in 360, and then inject and enrich them using technologies like AI glass or and you need to do it over all languages. In our case, 32 languages, we're moving to 108. So you can have those conversations. I talk English, it's Swahili on the other side, right? And you need to be open for technology like scraping and other things to inject knowledge in those objects, as well as other media formats into the same package, and to do it in multimodality, as well as exploring things, interacting, using things like phones to interact, putting things life-size in reality, or interacting between reality and augmented reality or X reality, having your own museums in any locations, right, that you want to have it, and then shrinking your Bologna kitchen in your pocket and bicycling home. So all this kind of approaches should be intuitive and easy to do, I believe in, while now having this enormous good visual quality that we are releasing now with 9.0, for example, for all kind of cultures in 72 countries to start with, but also make creation easy, whether you do a 3D recording or you do a step-by-step procedure or you do an animation. It should be as easy as PowerPoint, and extract this so you can open the same application, for example, in Unreal, and continue this. Collaboration, I think, is a key aspect, not only socially, but also in the context of learning. Assessing people, I think that's one wonderful thing with VR and AR, because you essentially have a simulator in your hands. And then illuminating the physical world, reversing this, so taking data from the digital world into the physical world to provide performance enhancement in all contexts. And perhaps making sure that it works well, that you can work in a desert when you have no internet connection, you can download it to your solution, and then publish this agnostically to any type of device. Magic Leap is one of them, by the way, but keep in mind, 4 billion people today have a mobile device. So why not allowing them to democratize XR to use that, and socially providing this? With all this together, we go to what you are talking about, and this is your slides, and I hope we can talk about it, where this is all going, because I think with this capacity, by creating, so to speak, these assets, liberating them to be enabled by anyone, we can reach such a level. So I know it's a lot there to unpack, but
I like that. That was great. I like super data download.
Yeah, this is when you have ADD, that's how the brain works, right? So I'm thinking like that because anyway, my doctor says that I don't need medication at my age, but it is what it is.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So by the way, next Tuesday we have a big, I have to do a little promo. Next Tuesday it's going to be our biggest launch event ever. And we're going to also invite a lot of users from people from Ghana or Vietnam, or people that today take their mobile phones and start scanning. And I think that's the power. If you can let a person in Harare scan their world. First of all, I've never been to Harare, so I don't know how. So scanning augmented reality in their context and bring that data to life and tell their stories, right? Not the Hollywood story necessarily, or the Silicon Valley story.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, let's go back to, because your story is endless, right? We did this for Magic Leap, and then it seems like you have almost like a plan. You work in Hollywood, then go to Silicon Valley, Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and then you went back to Matrix.
Like I said, it was, the thing that I kind of learned is that, dreaming and writing of your sort of ideas and visions can downstream actually manifest by those who are sort of understanding those things and have the interest, in sort of pursuing them in a real sense. So art informs science always, all the time, right? Artful dreaming. And it's always been that. And it's a wonderful relationship between art and science like that. They aren't really just two parts of the brain. They really do speak to one another, and the folks need each other, so to understand the sort of concept of what's meaningful, of value to people, it doesn't have to be about fantasy and escapism. It can absolutely be it's a dream about a way of life, right? Now, the mission, so just to conclude on Magic Leap, I found, just to conclude, right, which is that I spent as much time thinking about the platform and the sort of steps we might need to take, not by ourselves, but with others, right, which is a thing that is also a lesson learned, right, is that this achieving these things that we're chatting about now can come down to alliances, and because one company cannot be all. And I'm kind of very nervous about the one company is all thing. I think it's much better to have a federation of companies that have a value and a belief system that, does not lead to repression inside of the medium. So I think that's one thing. But so I found myself involved in everything from gigascaled smart city projects of the future, by different nations, to the pushing of limits in terms of visualization and simulation in different industries that would have a rightful place to be an in-between step for really sophisticated mixed reality. So what I mean by that is enterprises, that had locations that could be enabled for really sophisticated things to happen. I think that, things from certain kinds of companies, that have in the field operations that are complex and need really sophisticated visualization or simulation.
Oil and gas.
Yes, architecture, city building, right? But also, theme parks could be a beachhead because of the controlled environment. Institutions of education of all sorts, where it's like the learning lab, is the world, and they have an interest in not just educating people on site, but to have people, all those instances have an interest in remoting people to a virtual location in one way or another. And I think the future is that, literally millions of people could persist and coexist and collaborate in a location elsewhere in some other part of the world for whatever reason. So this whole idea of co-presence, social networking, and being productive through co-presence on a mass scale is coming.
Yeah, and I think we believe it. I mean, I'm sure you agree that the pandemic has opened our eyes for where digital technology can help. Even if Zoom is a very flat and not really experiential-based platform, but now people understand that you don't have to travel everywhere for a meeting and accept that. It's been now validated. And if you can bring this type of immersive, real experiences where you have a context, not just looking at heads, I think that there will be receptive. People are receptive. I've seen we had an 890% increase in our usage during the pandemic. We would never have got it. So if something positive came out of the negative is that people are now, this type of technology have accelerated in people's mind maybe 5 years in time, right? Their readiness to, so it moved from being something out in the future to be something pragmatic. And I think my approach, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I cut you off. You're right. We didn't expect such a crisis to actually accelerate the validation of things like immersive, co-presence and VR and mixed reality. But we're pulling out of the pandemic, and we still don't have the systems quite in place. We're verging on it, but we're still like a step away.
Yeah, you're right. And that's, to be honest, that's what we are trying to do. Even if you do very simple things compared with what's possible in the future, you need to take those steps because there is value, significant value. For example, in education, or just being able to capture a sculpture or something in 200 seconds and then bring it to life, tell a story about it, share it in 4 or 5 modalities. Stop there. That's it. But And the thing that for me it became so, and the reason I'm so passionate and believe this happens is there's 4 billion devices out there that can do it. So you don't need infrastructure. I mean, the infrastructure is more or less there. That's incredible. Now, let's go to one of my passion subject here, which is the Matrix, because in 2020.
Sorry, it's my camera's like defocusing here, but good.
Right, okay. I thought you. Anyway, tell me a little bit about the Matrix, and I know that Keanu Reeves, and you know him for a long time, and I understand he's in the new movies still, 20 years later. So, tell me a little bit of a movie, and I also understand that although probably it's covered by non-disclosure, that there is more than the movie that you engage in. Actually, you engage in the VR immersive side. So I'm very curious about that side, to the extent you can talk about it.
Okay, well, I am not authorized to speak about anything, to be honest with you, right now, because that is sort of in the domain of Warner Brothers and HBO to decide. So, it's just like, I don't need articles to get written, you know what I mean, based on sort of live wire commentary.
Let's skip that. And
the things that I can say is that the film is slated for release in December. Mm-hmm. It is a return to similar characters as the trilogy. So obviously there's a through line to some degree of the narrative. I do know that the shoot was successfully completed despite a very difficult year that all films, had. So from my understanding that it was actually in the end a very successful shoot, and that some very impressive and incredible scenes have been created. So we shall see. I haven't seen the cut, so I can't tell you for sure. But I think that the one thing I can say about Keanu is that anyone who's read any articles with him knows that he is a sort of a foundational supporter of this IP. He has had a very positive relationship, with the role of Neo. And he's an inspired person, and he's still, to this day, the whole time I've known him, 20 years, he is still as vibrant and energetic and engaged in the subject matter. And he's always had an interest in the subcultures, that surround the ideas of the Matrix. So this is the best sort of thing you could hope for with your cast, that they believe, right, in the value and integrity of the story and the world. And, that's the most I would say about it, is that I expect a good result, is what I expect.
Me too. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, art versus technology, right? So if you look at most technology-driven things are done by geeks, right? Whether that geek, Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or anyone. And these guys watch the same movies that I watched. I was hooked to. For me, Matrix was one of the most transformational movie, and it still is. I think it has a huge gathering of geeky techies like me. That believe in that movie, and to just see that evolving now 20 years later, I think it's going to be fantastic.
I think one thing I would say is that the first time that the idea came out or the film came out, it resonated because it had the right combination of ideas, aesthetics, but its timing was perfect with the generation, right? That generation was just beginning to understand that they are starting to live a digital life, right? Through the internet, through their work and games, what have you. Today, 2021, the 21st century, this is a very different generation. And I would argue that the concepts of the Matrix are even more, like far more relevant to what's happening in our lives today. The idea that there are these invisible systems of control, that are operating, to essentially, paint a reality for you, to, create paths and patterns for your way of life that you may not be choosing on your own because you're being influenced by something else, some sort of like invisible organization. These things are all like literal stepping stones to, I wouldn't say necessarily, machines, plugging wires into you, but I would imagine that, 50 years from now, it's quite easy to imagine a flawless simulation that some people spend quite a lot of time in, and with great impact to their understanding of reality, truth, all these things.
That's true. That's I was just when I was listening to you, plugging things in your head, but then we have Neuralink where you literally drill a hole in your brain and inject.
These are all like primitive. These are super primitive hacking techniques that are just early stage things. As for example, if you can use sensors to understand and predict a person's behavior by just watching them externally, like we talked about earlier in the podcast, but imagine that, all the research that's been done the last decade and further trying to map your response, your neural responses to any kind of stimulus, which there's a lot of research in that area, to not just try to understand what you're seeing in your mind, even if you don't have the vision of what the person's doing, and the ability of using the mind to control things, the sort of Neuralink, partly their direction. This is like, consider this the sort of primitive early stages of something that across the decades is going to get pretty outrageous.
Yeah, it's a convergence. I just have this ring. I don't know if you use the Aura ring, but it's become indispensable because it gives me an insight in me, my health, my sleep patterns, my heart rate variability. And of course, it will be linked with the glasses eventually. And it's now linked with my doctor because I have my DNA done. So I know exactly which genes that I need to suppress. And I happen to take about 30, 40 tablets a day just to address those. And you can now engineer the body in a way that that can actually bring us looking almost at us as machines. Now, I don't want to divert too much, but I need to ask the question, how do you think we might amplify ourselves in the future to expand ourselves, our capacity, our knowledge, our understanding?
Yeah, thanks. Well, we've come like on full circle. So now, maybe we should chat about education for a minute.
Yeah.
Right? Which, if one was to sort of create a sort of list, a stack of priorities of value, things that one would want to turn any technology towards to try to improve people's lives, their well-being, their future, give them potential for a future. It's without a doubt education, and to cut away the sort of noise that adults have found themselves caught up in with the sort of distractive media. If we just kind of just focus on what could have a meaningful impact to a child or an adult, if one considers lifelong learning, there's no doubt, right, that especially kids, will find fascination, wonder, and engagement with virtual objects if they're presented in an interesting way. And the other but that's not enough, of course. What goes along with that is, of course, a compelling mentor that that a person would trust, right, and want to learn from, right, and or follow. And so it's not enough to just have the technical capabilities to prop virtual objects into a room. It's more about like, and now what, right? Like, how do I engage, and is that engagement going to lead to retention of important ideas, facts, or concepts, right? So to teach complex concepts of, science, chemistry, math, biology, it could be, the physics of how things fly. It could be how to build a new type of energy efficient, structures. There's countless things that are important that kids of today need to know to be ready for their lives in the 21st century. So I absolutely believe that education and training is obviously the most important tool for people to figure out how to find a place in this world and to empower themselves, to self-empower themselves. And these platforms do present the opportunity for the greatest teachers ever to essentially be present in your home.
Yes.
Right? The best teachers, the most interesting teachers, the most influential teachers, the most empathetic teachers, right? The one thing that one wonders about in this kind of like, cyber education paradigm is like the relationship between a teacher and an individual child. That is something that's probably never going to be any better in a virtual sense if you're communicating to many kids or adults. But it's hard to find that in the real world anyway, right? It's hard to find that great. Most of us can only recite like, one or two teachers that had impact in our lives and actually had influence, right? Like that you can sort of say as an adult, hey, I remember this one person, right, that shepherded me and had confidence in me, right? And I have that inside me, even today. Now, so I'm not like all the way advocating not having human teachers in your presence, right? Physical teachers in your presence. However, in combination with very engaging ways of seeing things that you can't normally get into the classroom, right? 1,000-year-old ancient sculpture that only the Smithsonian has, right? Like, or a rocket ship part that you could only see if you were at SpaceX, right? To bring those things actually into your room does give a strategic advantage to the individual who gets the benefit of that. And there's no reason that all kids should not have access to that. I think that it's a way to solve, the sort of lack of, it should not only be in Oxford, right, that you can get a certain type of education. You could literally export Oxford holographically to, Greenland if you wanted, right?
And this blows my mind because there's so many threads I would like to pick and comment on, but time is limited, and we gone on for almost soon hour and a half. But one thing that you said that I would like to highlight. First of all, at least in the basic format, I see this as a sandbox, a piece of clay that because in the end, good teachers are good storytellers, right? And you can do great storytelling just verbally or painted a picture, but these tools will help to tell that story in a much more vivid way, in an interactive, in an exploratory role. So I think for me, this is a way to help teachers and help them in many ways, help them to tell that story, help them to change their role from be just Richard III reciters of the best lecture ever, which we can put on YouTube, to actually be that wise person in Karate Kid that shows you, guides you, mentors you in that context. So I think that's an important part. And I do think the other aspect you talked about is, I truly believe knowledge is a human right, and myself, our company is dedicated 15 years to help with knowledge transfer for functional and others. And what I see is kind of amazing. I'll take Africa as an example. Places like Ghana or Togo, Ethiopia are deploying this technology, jumping 6 steps in the future. There are places in Harare that are using to a level that Harvard doesn't do it. I interviewed a Harvard professor. He gave me 60. He actually gave me in that event 8 reasons why they will not do it, and this will not happen 8 years. And Harare is doing it.
So because of the institutional blocking, there's too many conflicts with trying to get alignment on trying new things when you're a gigantic institution. But if you've got, I wouldn't use the term nothing to lose, but if you're like small and you can make a decision on your own, right? If you can make a decision on your own and you can get the resource. So the key is, the question is like, how do they not, how does any small class, independent school get the resource to try to get the basic, tools, the hardware, et cetera, and so forth. So I do think that I can see that EON is trying very, very hard to make the accessibility to the platform as cost effective as possible. You do seem to get a huge amount of things, for very sort of manageable, price point. And but to me, I agree with your point earlier about like the mobile phone and the iPad and things like this could essentially be all that you need to get going, right? All you need is a viewer. So here we go with the the world conquering map.
Yeah, I couldn't resist it, but what was an eye opener for me? Sorry to interrupt you, but what was an eye opener for me was the fact that I went to Nigeria and I said, these guys have iPhone 10, iPhone 11, and they don't have one, they have 2. And I'm talking about people that, have almost no water and electricity, but have an iPhone or they have a Samsung device. So that became a huge eye opener for at least for me, because then I realized that we can do this. And they have internet, and internet is inexpensive. And hopefully with Elon Musk, by the end of this year, we'll have internet accessible in the most remote places on earth, in Congo, Democratic Republic, or in Laos. So I think this actually is, I can see for the first time in 36 years, I've been struggling with this, how we can do it. And we are doing it, and it's amazing. But although I'm very passionate about education, I'm also thinking that what do you need to learn? Because Google's made it's useless to actually learn facts about ages when wars were fought. You can read about it, but so what is it you need to learn? What is it you need to train for the jobs of the future? And I see the biggest point here is problem solving. Whether you have a career as an entrepreneur or, of course, as a doctor, you need to acquire a lot of knowledge. But even there's no way you can acquire the knowledge because there's no way you can keep up with the white papers. And so I'm thinking that a big part of simulation is to get you that ability to explore, but also the ability to awaken your curiosity. And finally, the ability to perform in reality. So you get that knowledge when you need it, as you need it, in the context that you need it. So I think AR will know, it will be AR on one side, or mixed reality, artificial intelligence on the other side, because that knows where you are, sensor data that will be everywhere, and there will be a link between those three, I believe. And also, I think that this will be a short, AR and VR has a lifespan of maybe 10, 20 years, because in 20 years, or maybe it takes a little longer, will circumvent. The question is, how do you get their input? Because right now you get it in your brain, right, through the eye. But if you can go interact straight to your brain, like neural links, you have.
Look, the phones are going to have everything you need for inputs, for human input, and the pads. They're just in that direction, right? The question is, I look at it this way: it's like old paradigm universities, YouTube, and whatever comes next, right? Okay. Because anyone with children will tell you that they learn a huge amount of things just by running videos off of YouTube. A lot of people, I do it all day long, right? Like if you don't know, if you don't understand something, you just go find a video, right? So the question is like, what's better than that, right? What's better than what's better than just getting instantaneous, quick, short form hacks to your problem on YouTube? Because that is actually becoming, weirdly, the source for education for many kids. Like, they go online, they go on the internet, they have, YouTube and other things, but they are gathering quite a lot. Then a person's in the real world and they're like, how do I figure out my way through this? They often just go for, testimonials and or lessons and or whatever it is, raging riffs off of YouTube videos. And they get a lot from that, but that is what they're doing. And that is what is actually starting to, I think, toss the old paradigm university system, around, because, they can't keep up with the pace of the world anymore, right? The world is changing so much and they can't keep up with it. So the case for immersive is that it's experiential. Mm. These videos are not experiential, but they are interesting and informative to some, but they're not experiential. And there is only one way to really sort of have a memory, a fix for a long time, is mostly to have an experience, unless some image is so outrageous that you never forget it, like a movie image. But if you experience something, you will retain something. And because you've done, some physical, you've done a connection between a physical action, right, and the knowledge that you gained at the time of that action. So I think there's a huge case for immersive being just a different paradigm. But, I think that it's time, like in the United States particularly, it's really time to really re-examine, right, what education needs to be when it happens and who it's for. And it cannot just be for the wealthy. It's got to be for everybody. And, for those who can't afford to go to major universities, they're turning to YouTube and other weird places to get education. Yeah. There's got to be other things, that are hybrids. There has to be hybrids.
No, I agree. I totally agree with you. I do think that the universities will survive, but not uniformly, because if you're 16, 17 years guy with full of hormones, you still want to go to a place where you can find, date girls, right? That's one point. You don't want to sit with your mother in the kitchen and look at YouTube videos. So I think there is a place for that, but they have to, as you just said, they have to change.
University is for social. Is that what you're saying? University.
No, there is a big social.
It's for the entire experience. It's all the.
Yeah, but I do think that it's a different role for them, and the university can be in the forest or at the beach, right? It doesn't have to be in those, Oxford buildings that have been there since forever. But as an ending to this, because I can't resist, I have, you here.
Let's land this plane, Dan.
Yeah, we're landing with
the last plane now.
We have one more. Sorry, I know you need places to go, and I've been most gracious with your time, but I can't let this go. Last question. I want your prognosis 10 years from now. Where are we with respect to VR and AR? And that's my last question, I promise.
Okay. I think that 10 years is a good time frame. So I think in 10 years, things are working. I think that essentially the need to, for example, this sounds simplistic, but the need to download apps and all the friction that goes into, on the work that the user has upon them to, get the materials they need and the setup that they need in order just to get, a frictionless experience will be gone. All that will go away. Not unlike, the sort of time to maximum performance that the iPhone took, right? Like it will not be that long before all you need to do is, put on your glasses or just open your phone or flip open your screen and you are inside immersive content of anything you choose, connected to any number of people that you want, including live events with many, many people. All of that stuff will work. It'll be frictionless and it'll be pervasive. It will, it's the growth curve of those participating in that. And I'm not saying that's only VR, because I think it's more mixed reality. And I also think there are manifestations of XR that one can do without, glasses of any sort or goggles. You can just be on a screen. I think all of that stuff is going to be, is functioning, and it's essentially the new internet. So, I'm a big believer that the internet is basically going to be dimensional across this decade, and frictionless. Everything is going to be frictionless, just like, the internet is more visited on a phone. We wouldn't have thought that at first, right? The internet seemed like something only you would do on your computer years back, but now really billions of people are interfacing with the internet in some fashion. And there are social networks that are sort of floating, between these platforms, on a mobile device. So it's going to be the case with all things XR, and some of the things you pointed out before. This move to create a replica of the real world will also be complete to some degree, and not in a static sense, not just hey, I have this static, unmoving model. It'll be dynamic, right? Yeah. So I think that people will be able to, just like on Google Earth, go anywhere you want, but it's the real location of at the moment, right? It's moving everything. The people are there. It's volumetric. I think that's reasonable to think that we're deeply down that road in a decade. And it may seem like a long time if you're waiting, as an entrepreneur for something big to happen. But it's nothing with regard to, the timeline of our lives. And just like we never imagined we'd be on video calls like this, that was in 2001, like that was a far future thing, right? The video call. And now it's part of our lives. So I honestly think that this is the decade. This is it.
Listen, I think on a high note and with that optimism, and I actually look forward to this journey, we should end at point. At this point, I look very much forward to work with you and create what you describe now, the metaverse, in one way or the other, in a small capacity. And in the end of the day, all we want to do is to leave this world better than when we came. So we hear the noise there. That means that we have to end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
The cicadas are in the plane engine. We've got to get
exactly.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
See you, everybody who's watching. Very nice to talk.
Bye. Bye.